Bible worm, reading the Bible with Bible worm.
Welcome to Bible Worm, getting to the core of the biblical text. I'm Dr. Amy Robertson, Director of Lifelong Learning and Music at Congregation Or Hadash in Sandy Springs, Georgia.
And I'm Dr. Robert Williamson, Professor of Religious Studies at Hendrix College and Theologian in Residence of Canvas Community in Little Rock, Arkansas. We're here every week to discuss the biblical text, both as biblical scholars and as people of faith, one Jewish and one Christian.
This week we read Luke chapter 16, verses 19 to 31, the story of the rich man and Lazarus. What a rich and evocative story about wealth and suffering and isolation, about excess and need and compassion. What blocks the flow of compassion in the different scenarios in this story and in our own world? When is it a chasm and when is it just a gate? What's the difference between having been told something and knowing something? And how do we cross that chasm? What happens when we build a life that insulates us from all suffering, our own and that of others? Thanks for being with us. Hello, Bobby.
Hey, Amy. How are you this fine day?
I am doing great this fine day, and I am also wearing purple.
Oh, like Lazarus,
Sort
like
of.
the rich
Well,
man.
you know, first I was like sort of in honor of our text today, but then I probably ought not be trying to dress like the rich guy.
No, you don't want to dress like the rich guy probably, but you know.
That's what happened.
That's what happened. Here you are. You're wearing your purple.
Here I am. Okay, I have important lessons to learn.
Yeah, I mean, purple
clearly.
is a very nice color, which is why it is the color of the wealthy elites. And so, like, if we weren't reading this particular text today, it would be beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This text is supposed to serve as a reminder about how to exercise your wealth, and so you can just ponder as we go.
It's good. Yes, it will be an important reminder for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we are reading today the pretty famous story, I think, of Lazarus and a rich man.
Yeah, there's two Lazaruses.
Lazari. I don't know.
Two Lazaruses in the biblical text. One of them is quite famous, and he's the other one, which is in John chapter
He's the other one.
11.
That's sad.
Jesus raises that Lazarus from the dead in a very dramatic scene.
Uh-huh.
This Lazarus is, I don't know, I think this Lazarus makes people kind of uncomfortable. It is a dramatic story in its own way, as we will see, but also in an uncomfortable way, in which...
Especially if you're wearing purple.
Lazarus does not get treated well in this text.
Yeah.
By the way, Lazarus is the Greek form of the name either Eliezer or Eleazar, which means like my God is a helper or something like that. And so I think that's an interesting background to this text. Like I just always think of like Lazarus is, but in the Hebrew Bible, anybody you meet named Eliezer is also got the same name.
Yeah, I had not been thinking about that. I'll hold on to that lens. I think I mentioned the last time we talked about this text. It is also a not uncommon last name in the Jewish community. I know a couple of people with the last name Lazarus. Yeah. So for me, it just sounds like a last name. But no, this is a form of Eleazar. Yeah. Great. So we're reading today from Luke chapter 16. We're starting in verse 19 and then going to the end. Last time we left off at the end of chapter, what was that, 13? No, 15. We read from chapter 15. So we haven't left off too much.
No, we haven't. Just the first half of chapter 16. But Amy, that is a kind of a strange first half of the chapter. Like, there's this parable, which is, I don't know what to do with. It is also about a rich man, and he hears that his manager is wasting his estate. And so the manager, in order to save his job, goes out and makes arrangements with everybody like, hey, do you owe my boss 1,000 jars of olive oil? Let's just make it 800. He does this, and then the rich man is like, hey, nice job. And it's a very, I'm glad it's not part of the narrative lectionary because I have no idea what to do with it. But where it is relevant for today is that we're in a series of passages about the distribution of wealth. We saw it a little bit last time in the prodigal story. We see it here with this parable. And then 16:14 says the Pharisees who were overhearing this parable that Jesus told, says the Pharisees were money lovers. They heard all this and sneered at Jesus. And so there is something going on here about the distribution of wealth. There's a line in 16:13 that says, you cannot serve both God and wealth. Like Luke is hitting very hard this theme.
Yes.
About there is a conflict of interest here between having wealth and following God. And the Pharisees kind of find themselves caught up in the middle of that, which is why Jesus tells the parable that we're going to read today.
Yeah, following that, you cannot serve God and wealth with the Pharisees who were lovers of money. Yeah. Oh, snap. Yeah. Like, that's strong.
That is strong.
That's
yeah.
strong.
And to me, it's helpful to read, like, because, Pharisees, I'm not a Pharisee. Like, and so I can be, it's easy for me to be judgy about Pharisees as Pharisees because I don't relate to them really. But then once you start to think of them as like religious leaders and scholars who have money that they may not use appropriately, then I think, we're getting a little close to home now.
Ta-da! You're wearing purple too. No.
Yeah. So I think it's how we're not talking about like Jesus is not frustrated with them because they're Jewish or because they're religious leaders exactly.
That's right.
But because they have their priorities out of whack. And so then now that calls me onto the table in a different kind of way. Calls me onto the table. I feel like that's not the right expression. Calls me on the carpet.
It sounded a little scary to me, like there was going to be some kind of exploratory surgery happening.
Yeah, don't call me onto the table.
Okay. All right, Bobby, let's see what this text brings up for us. I am reading from the NRSV, and I'm going to start at verse 19. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who longed to satisfy his hunger with what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs would come and lick his sores. Okay, I realized that was only 3 verses, but I want to pause for just a second because I feel like that's such a... I want to get the sort of scene right before they actually start. Well, actually, while they're alive, because they're both going to die in the next verse.
Right. Luke does a remarkable job of setting kind of it's a rich scene that he has set in these just couple of verses.
In only 3 verses. Yeah. So trying to put aside the fact that we know we're supposed to not like the rich guy.
Yeah.
What do you pull out of this description of him about what he was wearing and what he was eating? And how can you press it towards, certainly I think we could press it easily towards the negative, but how can we press it towards more positive values or things that you and I might do? I think it's important that we find a way to relate to this guy.
I think so too, Amy. That's really important. And, I think Jesus's audience would not necessarily have thought this. I mean, we know that because we've read this parable before, right? But I don't know that they would have had negative thoughts about the rich man when Jesus first started talking. I guess Jesus did just say, a couple of chapters ago, he said, woe to you who are rich. And just now he said, you cannot serve both God and money. But I think culturally, this guy might even have been someone that we might have wanted to emulate,
Yeah.
So a couple of things there. One is purple is the color of royalty. And so it is a color worn by elite people. The dye was very expensive and hard to produce. And so only a certain class of people had purple clothing. Mm-hmm. Fine linen is also a material that's used by wealthy people. To wear them both at the same time is honestly a little bit kind of gauche or something. I don't know.
Over the top.
You're kind of over the top a little bit. Yeah. The language that's there for he feasted luxuriously every day is the same Greek that was used for the feast that the father threw for his younger son in the prodigal story who came back and we have to have a feast for him. And in that story, it was this is a once in a, maybe not once in a lifetime, but once every few years you would have this kind of meal. And the older son was jealous because he didn't get one. Here, this guy's doing that every day.
That's so helpful to connect that language specifically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, I think the parallel, like this is a really rich guy who is sort of ostentatious in his wealth. But when you think about our culture, like we can think of people like that a lot of us do look up to in a certain kind of way, or at least we want to have the wealth that they have. Like, I mean, I'm thinking like a Jeff Bezos or a Bill Gates or a Elon Musk.
Yes. I mean, I guess I don't know how far in the direction of wealth we have to press this in order for it to make sense. But there are a lot of people who take great pride in wearing beautiful clothing.
Yeah.
That is beautiful and rare and soft, and this is the whole culture. We're just fed pictures of beautiful people wearing beautiful clothing.
Yes.
I noticed that the text doesn't say anything or anything else, at least, about his character. It doesn't say whether he was thankful or not. It doesn't say whether he goes to pray. It doesn't say whether he worked hard to earn this and this is his retirement bonus. Like it just says he has it and he has it and he's using it.
Yes.
I think it's easy for me to jump to he's a horrible person. Like this is like the Grinch, but it doesn't say he's the Grinch. It
doesn't say he's the Grinch, but it does say that there's a man at his gate who wants to eat the scraps from the table and apparently can't.
Yeah.
And so this wealth is not being shared with people who are very close in proximity. Like it's almost like he would have to sort of step over Lazarus. Like Lazarus is in the gate of his home. Yeah. Like it's on his front porch. And so he has to like walk right by him. I don't know, maybe step over him. I don't know. But and so I don't know that he's a good person or a bad person, but he is certainly not tuned in to the needs of that one who is at his house.
No, I mean, I think that's critically important. Well, I mean, obviously it's critically important. And also, maybe this is a dumb question, but so you would assume from this that he knows Lazarus is there. This is not someone who's like just outside his property and he doesn't know he's there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things there. One is I think if somebody's at your gate, you would see them. It's like somebody hanging out in your driveway or whatever. And a little bit later in the text, which we haven't quite gotten there yet, he's going to refer to the man as Lazarus when he talks about him to Father Abraham.
That's right.
And so not only does he know, like not only has he seen him, but he actually knows his name.
Yeah.
And so, so I think he does.
Yeah. He might be able to not think about his presence there at least when he's in his house, he can stay in his, bubble of comfort, but he must know he's there.
Like there's a woman that I drive past when I'm bringing my kids home from school, and she's very friendly. She stands on the street corner and she waves, and my kids wave back at her. But, like that's our whole interaction. Like I see her, I don't know her name, I don't know anything about her, I don't give her anything, and my kids are like, what's that lady doing there? And so, I mean, it could kind of be like that, where, you're aware, but it's not like it affects my life in any kind of a way.
Yeah.
That may be sort of what this rich man is doing.
Bobby, when it says that he longs, it doesn't say he longs for the life that this man has, or he longs for his wealth, or he longs for whatever. He longs for the waste.
Yeah.
Like he longs for the scraps that fall from the table.
Yeah.
And probably because we just read the story of the prodigal son, it reminded me of how the prodigal son longed for the food that he was giving to the pigs.
Yeah.
And then that reminded me sort of what I pointed out, tried to point out about the rich guy, but I think it's even more true for Lazarus. We don't know anything about this guy.
We don't.
Maybe he had wealth. Maybe he got his whole inheritance and squandered it.
Yep.
Maybe he's made a lot of mistakes. Maybe he wouldn't have shared his wealth either if he had it. We don't know anything about him. We just know that he is suffering.
I think that's really important. So is he a good person who fell on hard times? Is he somebody who wasted his money? Like does he deserve to be out there?
Right.
this text is not at all interested in that. And I think it might be suggesting that maybe it doesn't matter. Like you and I should also not be interested.
Yeah.
I mean, we could be interested, but we shouldn't be making judgments about
right. You
how
don't
did
decide,
that person come to be at the gate.
Yeah.
I so much appreciate your connecting it to the prodigal story. And, you know, that guy, the younger son, no one would give him anything to eat. And so he fell back on his family resources. Let me go back to my house. This guy seems to have nowhere to go. He's in the same situation.
Yes.
But he's just stuck.
Yeah.
So nobody's going to give me anything. And so I'm just going to sit out here till I die, basically, is how it seems. Even that language of scraps from the table, I like the way you said that as he wants to eat the waste. And he's not asking for anything fancy. He just wants enough to stay alive. It reminds me of some of my friends from Canvas Community and Mercy Church who eat out of dumpsters. Like they'll find restaurants and then they'll go, and when they take out the food at the end of the day, they eat out of the dumpster. And there are some restaurants around town that have put their dumpsters behind locked gates so people can't do that.
That's
like,
right.
Oh my goodness. Like, I mean, I get it, whatever, like profit margins and such, but these folks just want your leftovers at the end of the day, and all that's going to happen to them is they're going to get taken to the landfill. So couldn't you just, you know, unlock that gate or something? This feels a little bit like that to me.
Oh, wow. That's a really powerful modern example, Bobby. I want to ask you one more question about this part, about the dogs.
Yeah.
Do you read this as like a form of compassion that they lick his sores? Or do you read it as that's gross?
I'm so curious how you read it.
Well, I mean, honestly, my first gut reading of it was that it was gross because I don't like to be licked by dogs, and the thought of them licking a cut sounds like sounds just gross all around to me.
Yeah.
And so if you follow that pathway, then you get to sort of like it's another sort of degradation that the man experiences. But if you think of it as compassion, I don't know, it had me thinking about sort of like the ability of animals, and you know, you hear these stories about dogs in particular all the time, to be with someone who is suffering and just to be with them. I don't know. I want to say not to overthink it and not to feel guilt at what you can't do and not to feel shame at resources that you don't deserve. But I guess I have no idea the interior state of a dog. But
yeah,
I don't know. How do you read these? How do you read this?
I love that reading, Amy. You know, when I read this with my students, I transpose it because we mostly love dogs. Even if you don't love being licked by dogs, like dogs are sweet little family pets and we love them. And this is really more like being licked by a raccoon or a possum or something like that. Like
this is the degradation.
Rat. They're just like scavengers.
Yeah.
And they also need food. And so what they're doing is licking the wounds because I guess, I don't know why dogs lick wounds, but they do. Like it tastes good to them. But I also I don't like it. But what you're saying about you could read it compassionately is this man is untouched, untended, uncared, and he needs somebody to care for him. And these possums are actually doing more than any person is doing.
That's right.
Which is horrible, but also, you know, at least they're doing something. This is coming out of when you think about the Good Samaritan story that we read a couple weeks ago, where that Samaritan picked the guy up and took him to the hotel and left his credit card at the desk, how far he went beyond. And here we have somebody that the only compassion that they get is from these sort of scavenging animals who are enjoying licking his sores. It's a harsh image.
Well, this is quite an image that it has painted for us. Are you ready to move on? Is there anything else pressing on you here?
The only other thing I was looking at also is just in terms of names. One is that it is very rare in Jesus's parables that characters get names. I can't actually think of another example of that.
Yes.
This guy gets a name.
Yes.
And the rich man does not get a name. And so that says something about the relative status of these two characters.
That's right. I realized in my notes I was calling both of them Lazarus. It got very confusing.
It does, yeah.
Don't do that.
The rich man and Lazarus. Yeah. I was also thinking just about the fact that this guy's name, Lazarus, is Eliezer, which means my God is a helper. And I was just kind of wondering, like, does that name matter? Like, not just that he is named, but he is named Lazarus. Do you think that matters here?
Well, it certainly doesn't have a human helper.
So you could read it as like, my God is my only helper or something like that. Mm-hmm.
Are you thinking something else?
No, that's kind of where my head goes too. I don't quite, It's emphasizing God's help, which I think in this context amplifies the lack of human help.
Hi, I'm Terry Peterson, minister of St. John's Church of Scotland in Gourock, west of Glasgow on the Scottish coast. And I am the liturgy writer for Bible Worm, which means I get to spend a lot of time listening to Bobby and Amy, and that is a great joy. It is fascinating to hear them read and talk through stories I thought I knew pretty well, since I'm starting my third time through the narrative lectionary now. I always come away with more ideas than I can fit into a liturgy or a sermon, and working with them has deepened my own spiritual life as I write liturgy that follows the contours of their conversations. I appreciate that they don't shy away from the difficult parts, and that they always find connections between these ancient texts and our contemporary life. And it's fun for me to work those connections into liturgy that empowers worshiping communities to speak to and about God in new ways. If you join the Bible Worm Patreon at the Liturgy Worm level or higher, you'll have access to those liturgies and prayers that you can use or adapt, as well as early access to the podcast. Or there are other levels with different benefits, including Bible studies, access to the Bible Worm Collaborative discussion group, and more. Visit patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast to help Bobby and Amy continue creating this incredible resource for people of faith around the world. And now back to this week's podcast.
Maybe it gets better.
It
gets different.
In the good Lucan fashion, it sort of reverses, like Mary said it was going to.
That's true. That is a very Lucan move. Okay, let's see Luke do his thing. I'm picking up in verse 22. The poor man died and was carried away by the angels to be with Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. In Hades, where he was being tormented, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. He called out, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in agony in these flames." But Abraham said, "Child, remember that during your lifetime you received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner evil things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. Besides all this, between you and us a great chasm has been fixed, so that those who might want to pass from here to you cannot do so, and no one can cross from there to us." Okay, I have a background question that maybe I should know as the Jewish member of this collaboration, but I don't know, and so maybe you know. Is there a tradition or a belief about being carried off by angels to Abraham that would have been like operative around this time?
I mean, I think that there is a sense in both Judaism at this stage and in Christianity of an afterlife in which there is actually reward and punishment. You know, in an earlier phase of Israelite religion, the afterlife was sort of like, you know, you were a shadowy figure of yourself living in Sheol and sort of this, basically you were asleep for eternity or something like that. And so there wasn't really the sense of reward and punishment. But when you get to Enoch and texts like that in the 3rd century BCE and following along, you do start to get this idea of an afterlife with reward and punishment. The idea of angels carrying you away to Abraham, I'm not familiar with from anywhere else. And so I would have to do some work on that to see what he's drawing on. The fact that it's Abraham, though, seems important. I mean, it's important in this text.
Yeah. Well, you know, when you just said that, it reminded me of, wasn't it earlier in Luke that there was that line that was sort of like the fact that you are the children of Abraham, that's not going to cut it.
Yeah.
So
John
it's
the
interesting.
Baptist said that in his sort of fiery sermon in Luke 3.
Yeah.
He said, I can raise up children of Abraham from these stones. So that's not going to do it. Yeah. And here we see that enacted. That's exactly right.
I also maybe you can check the Greek for me. I just have a footnote in my study Bible here, but the note is the language here in the text is that he is by Abraham's side. Mm-hmm. And my footnote says that he is brought to Abraham's bosom, to the bosom of Abraham.
I think that's the right translation.
That's just such a different image to me. Yeah. Like, that is a place of like comfort and compassion and safety and protection. Not just like, I'm on Abraham's team and we're buddies.
Yes.
But it's like all the like embodied warmth and safety that he didn't have when he was on earth.
Yeah, that's well said, Amy. Yeah, the image that comes to my mind is, my son right now is 3. And so when he's gotten hurt or when he's sad or, like I pick him up and I hold him like that. Mm-hmm. And that, like, this is sort of how I see that is like Abraham, the compassionate father who's taking up into his arms the son who has suffered greatly.
Yeah.
And it's not just about teams. You're exactly right. It's about he is now being comforted.
Yeah.
When he needed someone to comfort him in his life, he didn't have it. But now here's Abraham able to do that for him.
Yeah. And meanwhile, that rich man has died, and it just gives us first the treatment of his body. He's died and he's buried.
Right.
And then we see he's not just buried, but he is his body is buried.
Right.
And I guess however we want to think about what part of him, his spirit or whatever, is being tormented in Hades.
Right.
When he cries out to Abraham, he says, "Have mercy on me." Mm. We really like mercy, Bobby. Don't we like mercy?
I like mercy. I had a church named Mercy.
You did.
Yeah.
You did have a church named Mercy.
I like mercy.
He's not trying to make the case that he has earned this or I don't know, that this is, he's not seeking justice. Mm-hmm. He's seeking mercy and a relatively modest bit of mercy. He's not saying save me. He wants a drop of water.
Yeah, he's not even asking for a cup of water. He's asking for a dip your finger in the water and put it on my tongue.
Yeah.
It reminds you of scraps of bread from the table.
It does. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I find myself, this will be a surprise to no one, probably empathizing with the wrong person here. I don't want him to suffer because I don't want anyone to suffer. Right. It's not about justice. It's not about, and I'm anticipating that the text is not going to offer him this mercy that he is seeking. And, just yesterday I was reading with a bat mitzvah student, one of the times in the Hebrew Bible where it cites this law code, an eye for an eye.
Yeah.
And so my mind went to that text, like, well, you didn't offer this little bit of mercy when you had the capacity to do it. And so it's not going to be offered back to you. The text is going to play that out a little bit differently, but I don't know. I just wanted to pause us in that moment. I mean, do you empathize with him? Do you want him to get a drop of water?
I do. And I mean, one of the things that's really interesting to me in this text is the way Abraham frames it about the chasm.
Yes.
The chasm has been put there. And the first thing he says is, so those on our side who wish they could come to you can't.
Yes.
And then he says, and you can't come here either, right?
Yes.
But the impulse is people who are with Abraham would want to go and help him if they could.
Yes.
Which suggests that Lazarus would want to go and help him if he could.
Yes.
And so, I mean, this in my experience is so true, like in my homeless communities, but not everywhere and always, but they're some of the most generous people. And if they have a little bit of extra something, they're going to give it to their friend who doesn't have enough. Mm-hmm. Or maybe, they'll even give it, like they offer it to me who doesn't need it. And so I think there is something in humans, maybe, or at least in compassionate humans, but maybe more so in people who have been through some stuff, that they don't want to see other people go through some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not said in the text, but I could imagine Lazarus here, instead of thinking, ha ha, now you're getting what you deserve, he's thinking, oh my goodness, I know what it's like to not have
I know what
the
it's
little
like
scrap.
to suffer.
And I want to come. So there is a chasm that has been put between
Mm-hmm.
the good place and the bad place so that you can't cross it. Now, the existence of the chasm, I think, is what you're after,
Yeah.
which is like, why would God
But yeah,
presumably...
by what mechanism has this chasm formed?
And we read that weird text a couple of weeks ago in Luke 13 that said, you'll die just like they did. And like there was some sense. We read Mary's Magnificat way back when that talked about the overturning of the order. We've read some texts that have implied, at least, that the things you do in life have consequences for your death. And so the chasm is there, or at least the like Lazarus and the rich man are where they are relative to the chasm because of the way the rich man acted in his lifetime. He had no mercy, and so he won't receive mercy. I don't love that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't love that, but I kind of get it.
But you get it.
It's a motivator at the very least. Like,
It does have this element of an eye for an eye to me,
it does.
which is a very difficult teaching for me.
It is.
But related to what you were saying, Bobby, I was struck and sort of moved that Abraham calls him child.
Yeah.
Like that's such a soft place to start.
Mm-hmm.
And to be in this, he's called Father Abraham, and then he replies child, and to not be able to extend that mercy is, I don't know, it just makes it more poignant, I guess.
And I think that's right. And the fact that like Abraham has not disowned him
No.
or said, you don't belong to me. And you can read him sort of like sorrowfully saying, my child, like I wish that this were possible, but this is just the way that it is. And so there does seem to be some compassion in there, even though it's not actually going to result in mercy.
Yeah, it makes me think about what are the systems in our world now, because that's the world that I'm in, that sort of feel like they block compassion. Like we have a compassionate impulse, but we cannot get from here to there. We can't figure out how to get from here to there. And how, of course, that is painful on the side of the person who needs compassion. But it also is really painful if you're feeling compassion and you can't act on it.
One thing to keep in mind, Amy, is that this is a parable and not a like treatise on the nature of the afterlife.
True story. That's right.
And so we could read it that way, like this is really what heaven and hell are going to be like. Or we could read it as like, what's the message here? And one of the things that's noticeable here is that in the Hades part of the story, there is a canyon, a crevasse, a chasm that prevents mercy. In the first part of the story, when they were all still alive, there still wasn't any mercy, but it wasn't because there was any kind of actual chasm there. It was like, I was talking
gate.
about it as there was a gate. And
right,
I was
but
talking
you
about
can open a gate. You can't
the rich
just...
man had to probably step over him to go to work,
Yeah.
And so there was a chasm there, but it didn't have to be there. And so the chasm was like in the guy's heart or in his actions or something like that. And so, we're saying like, oh my goodness, like how terrible it is that guy burning in Hades doesn't get any compassion, which I mean is yes. And also, how much more horrible is it that person being licked by possums didn't get any compassion when he could have just reached out and given him a hand, handed him some bread. And so I think this parable is trying to amplify the lack of compassion of the rich man.
Yeah.
As much as it is trying to say like, this is what heaven is really like and God has no mercy on people.
And it has me, I hope this isn't, I don't want to pull us too far afield here, but the way you just articulated that had me thinking too about the way these kinds of things play out in the world now. that when we have opportunities to be compassionate to someone who's really, maybe on the other side of a gate, so we have to do something, but it's, not that hard.
Right.
If we don't do that and don't do that and don't do that, chasms do form. Chasms form in our political systems. Chasms form in who we're even going to see over the course of our daily lives.
Yes.
And then it really feels, I do often feel blocked up. You see images on the news and you don't know, you don't know what you can do.
Yes.
Because it's gotten so, there's a chasm now.
Yes.
And I really like reading this story. I just want to be like, cross it, Abraham. Like, just cross it.
Yeah.
You can.
Yes.
Because he feels the movement. He feels a movement in his heart to do it in a way that the rich man did not feel.
Yes.
But that's not how this story goes.
It is interesting that it is not clear whether or not Abraham and Lazarus feel compassion for the man or not. Like, I read it that way because of that child language and that way that that's framed. But it's not, like, it's not said exactly. But the way you said that was reminding me of this theme we've seen in these texts about, the Good Samaritan felt compassion, and so he helped. Jesus felt compassion for the widow, and so raised her son. Like, we've seen that idea of, like, feeling it in your guts coming back. And here we have a story about a lack of compassion, certainly for the rich man toward Lazarus, maybe or maybe not. But the compassion is blocked here. So even if you wanted to, you couldn't. And so it's kind of raising the question of, like, what is the world like when there is no compassion, when you don't feel, or I like the way you're saying that, when you experience the world as having a chasm in it that you would like to cross, but it feels uncrossable to you. Even though really it's not, even though really the person's just right there.
It was striking to me that the way that Abraham speaks to the rich man, he doesn't say, this is because you didn't help the poor man. He doesn't point to anything that the rich man did wrong or that he should have done differently.
You're right.
He just says, in your lifetime, you received your good things and Lazarus received evil things. And so now it's switched. As you said, very Lucan move. But maybe I shouldn't say but, like, could it have been otherwise? Like, yes, he did. He was given great privilege and wealth in his life. And Abraham is not underscoring anything he should have done differently about that. Right. Is this like a pre-selection thing or is it a consequence of his? We're talking about it like it's a consequence, but that's not exactly clear from what Abraham says.
You're asking a Presbyterian about predetermination.
I know.
Which we love. And the Presbyterian is going to say, I don't think this is about that. But I think you could read it that way. Like, you were predetermined that you were going to have wealthy things in this life, and it was predetermined that he was not, and therefore he's going to have a blessed afterlife. I think that is available in this text. The way that I would prefer to read it, and then maybe because that reading makes me really uncomfortable, because, like, my life right now is kind of pretty decent. Yeah. And so, like, I don't know how I come out in the predetermined world, is the problem that Abraham is pointing out is that in this life, some people had good things and some people didn't. And the vision of the Torah is that we could have a community in which everyone has good things. And so if you were not Richie Richardson wearing purple and linen and eating a feast every day, that guy could have been okay. And then we wouldn't need a reversal because there would be nothing to reverse. Now, what I've done there is just push it back to, in fact, it was about deeds, or at least about disposal of one's wealth. I don't think this text is necessarily talking about you should be ashamed of having good things, but you should be thoughtful about what you do with the good things that are given to you.
Yeah, your stewardship of those things.
How you use them on behalf of the community and how you use them on behalf of people like Lazarus. Maybe?
Yeah,
what do you think about that?
That's a really interesting, like, sort of combination of thinking about what the rich man has or hasn't done himself in his life and how far the social scene had gotten at that point from the vision of the Torah. So it's sort of a more nuanced view instead of just saying like, well, you were a big jerk.
Right. Yeah. The
Maybe
Torah's
true.
going to come up,
and
in
also,
this last part. Yeah.
the world was kind of set up in a way that made that real easy for you.
Yes.
And none of that was supposed to be, none of that is the vision that is laid out in the Torah.
That's so well said, Amy. It always seemed, it comes to seem natural that some people have and some people don't. And we experience these things as like chasms that exist when they actually don't. And we learn to inhabit the world the way that it's given to us. Mm-hmm. And we're working in the imagination of the empire about how the distribution of goods should go. And there's another way to do it. And it's been told to us, it's been handed to us on Sinai. And we could go look at it. But this man seems to either not have done that or not have taken very seriously what he read there.
You have just led us so fluidly into the next section of text. Yeah. You ready to move on?
I'm ready.
Okay, I'm picking up then in verse 27, and it's the rich man speaking to Father Abraham here. He said, "Then, Father, I beg you to send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, so that he may warn them, so that they will not also come into this place of torment." Abraham replied, "They have Moses and the prophets. They should listen to them." He said, "No, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent." He said to him, "If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead."
One of the things that's clear to me in this text is that the rich man has not learned any lessons, really. Like, he's still bossing Lazarus around. He still thinks he's like the boss of him, maybe the chasm would like go away when the rich man finally learned his lesson. I don't know. That would be a good Disney movie or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We can make the Disney movie of this. Okay. Yes. But at least he expands a little bit beyond his own
that is true.
Suffering body at this moment.
That is true.
Yeah. Not to a real big picture. But he's worried about his brothers. He is.
That's true. He's being compassionate toward his family whilst treating Lazarus as his errand boy. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And just say, I guess it, in the family culture, in the household that he's from, like, he just didn't imagine that this could be an outcome for his behaviors on earth.
Yeah.
And so he's like, you've got to go back and tell the others.
I like that, Amy, because it helps nuance a little bit what we were trying to talk about earlier, which is it's not just that this guy is like a bad dude.
Yeah.
It's that this is the family structure he was raised in, and all of his brothers are doing exactly the same thing. And it would not occur to them to do otherwise because that's just the way they were taught.
That's
the world
the water they were swimming in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's such a sort of, I think, true and painful point that Abraham makes, that it may be true that you didn't know, like you didn't take into yourself this knowledge, and your brothers have not taken into themselves this knowledge. But we have told you this 1,000 different ways.
Yeah.
You have Moses and you have the prophets. Another messenger is not gonna change anything.
Yeah.
Do you think that's true, though? Like, if someone came from the dead and was like, your brother sent me and this is what's happening to him, like, I feel like that, I don't know. Do you think that's true?
The counterpoint is like Scrooge McDuck.
Yes.
Thinking of Disney movies where, the ghosts from various Christmases remind Scrooge of the true values of life, Mm-hmm. I wonder if that story is a response to this text. I never thought about that. We need to talk to a Dickens scholar.
I never
to think
thought about that.
Like, was he riffing on this story?
Yeah, I don't know.
There is obviously an edge here, right? So, that ending, if someone rises from the dead, like when you're reading the Gospel of Luke, you're thinking Jesus is going to rise from the dead. Mm-hmm. And so maybe you actually, or some of us would actually be more likely to believe it if our dead brother came back than if Jesus rose from the dead. But it's such an interesting way of framing it, because what he says is just go read the Torah. Like, it's right there.
Yeah.
And the prophets have been saying the same thing. And so in this text, it seems to be saying for Jewish people, they actually don't need Jesus because all of that's already been given to you in the Torah and the prophets. So just like you've got what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that, in my mind, then that shifts the pertinence of the gospel to Gentiles who don't have the Torah and the prophets. Like, how do they know? Well, they might believe if there was somebody who rose from the dead. That's not at all what you asked me about.
No, but I did have that on my list of questions, so
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah, we got from Scrooge McDuck to the necessity of Jesus, but
Yeah.
you have thoughts about that?
I mean, I had the same sort of question come to my mind, like, and it seemed a very scandalous question to me. So I'm sort of glad to know that it came to
It's
your
total.
mind.
What I just said is total heresy, but
Also.
I think it might be a fair reading of Luke.
I think what it made me think about was if you need the death and resurrection, if you need someone to rise from the dead to tell you what the Torah already says,
Yeah.
that's a problem.
Yeah.
And also, I think I'm probably pressing beyond Luke here. So rein me back in because the boundaries of Christian conversation are very fuzzy to me.
Sure.
But there was more to Jesus's death and resurrection than just like getting people's attention back to the Torah, right? It was like some kind of ultimate, I want to use the word like tikkun, like healing for something that had like broken in the cosmos, right? Is that in
Right.
Luke also?
So one of the things that we're struggling around, and it is a struggle for everybody, is that Paul in the New Testament, who writes all the letters, has a very different understanding of the role of Jesus than I think Luke does.
Mm-hmm.
And so Paul has sort of come to be the primary way we think about like the purpose of the crucifixion and resurrection. And it's hard to know, like, do we read Luke in light of Paul or do we see him doing something different? I don't know. What I can say is that in Luke Acts, he does not use the language of atonement for Jesus' death. The way Luke talks about Jesus' death is people see that they crucified Jesus and they think, oh my God, how could we have done that to that innocent person?
Yes.
And it shocks them so much that they repent. And then the repentance is what actually leads to their restoration or their afterlife or whatever.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And the purpose of the resurrection then is to show that God actually, like, this is God's approval of the life of Jesus. Like, the reason you know that person was living a godly life is because God resurrected him, but you killed him, you human person. And so that sort of supposed to shock you into thinking differently about how you live your life, which is sort of what's going on here. Like, it's not the resurrection itself, or like the warning from beyond the grave. It's the like sudden awareness of how cruel humans can be to each other. And that the God of the Torah has already given us an antidote for that, revealed in Jesus. That was a lot of soteriology and whatnot.
No, that was really helpful. And so I'm trying to really helpful and interesting. And I'm trying to ground myself back in like this story because I want to talk about that stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
So in this story, maybe there's no answer to this, but like, what then do we do? How then do we help people who, yes, the Torah and the prophets are available and have been said and are before them, but like, as I often talk about when we send out too many synagogue emails, just because you have told someone something doesn't mean they have received that information.
Right.
And so, I mean, maybe that is a question for us now and not for the text, but what the text is saying is that we've tried so many other ways that sending another messenger of the same message, we have no reason to believe that that's going to be the thing. We just should give up, kind of, or it's on them. I mean, or it's on them, or it's or maybe it's just. Well, he doesn't say I'm not going to help you with that, even though it would be helpful. He says it wouldn't be helpful.
It wouldn't be helpful. Yeah. One of the things so Jesus plays this one role in his crucifixion, resurrection, and Gospel of Luke, like pointing out human wickedness. But the positive side of it is Luke understands Jesus as showing and telling people how to live life according to the Torah. Like, this is what that looks like if you actually lived it out. And so there is a positive example here, but it's not the example of somebody coming back from the dead. It's the example of somebody living the way the Torah calls you to live, which ironically gets him killed. And so, like, I think pointing out that sort of radical conflict between the way the Torah calls us to live and the way the empire calls us to live.
Yes.
And, oftentimes we tend to process as like, well, if my culture thinks I'm successful, I must be doing it right.
Right.
And the gospel is saying, no, if you're like the empire's going to probably want to kill you if you're actually living the Torah correctly. So Jesus can be read as that sort of example. It de-emphasizes Jesus' resurrection somewhat and makes his life, it's more like moral exemplar kind of idea.
I'm reading in some other things, a lot of texts about sort of awakening, like what do we need to do to awaken ourselves to the things that are already present in the text and that are already around us. And it seems like part of what I'm taking from Abraham's response is that, like, if your brothers are not awake to what is around them, it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
And if they are awake, they will see it.
Yep, that's well said.
Bobby, is there anything else you would want to raise from these couple of verses?
I don't know that this is the most important thing in this text, but it is so interesting to me that this person who has, the rich man who has not experienced any compassion in his life, now has compassion born out of agony. I don't want my brothers to experience this agony. I mean, it is still limited.
Yes.
Right, because it doesn't extend beyond his family. But something about the experience of agony has made him attentive to the agony of others.
Which connects to what you were saying before, sort of about how you imagine Lazarus is experiencing this, that he wants to cross the chasm because he knows suffering.
Right. And so when we use our wealth to protect us from, or at least to try to protect ourselves from suffering, we might actually be just alienating ourselves from the human experience.
Oh, man.
In a way that makes us compassionless. I'm coming real close to commending agony, which is not what I mean to do.
No, I know, but that just got really real the way that you said that. We have this impulse to protect ourselves from suffering. And it's important in some ways. Yes, we should care for our bodies and honor our bodies and all of the, yes. And if we go too far with that, it makes it harder to empathize.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. There are so many really rich themes in this text, Bobby. I had a thought of where I was going to end, and now I'm like, is that where I want to end? I don't know.
Yeah.
What's feeling fiery to you right now?
Fiery, yeah. It's appropriate for this text.
It is. The good kind of fiery.
The good kind of fiery. A fire in my bones. I keep coming back to this chasm idea. I think you can tell that's sort of where my thoughts are. And, this idea of the chasm in the afterlife or in Hades has been sort of put there as a heavenly, afterlife-y reflection of a chasm that was also present in the worldly life. But that chasm, as you and I have been talking about, does not have any actual existence. And so I'm thinking about the ways in which we create chasms between ourselves and people who are suffering and why we do that. The fact that this rich man seems to have stepped over Lazarus, or at least walked right by him, knew his name, wouldn't give him a crumb of bread. And, there is a chasm there between those two people's life, even though their actually physical proximity is very close. You were talking earlier about how it's actually possible in our world, by choosing where you live and where you shop and where you go to services and where you work and what route you take. Like, we can actually create a world
Mm-hmm.
where we never really have to see people like Lazarus. We pull our car into our garage and close the garage door and live in our house. And,
Mm-hmm.
We can be totally separated. And sometimes that feels good, like it feels safe. It feels insulated. It feels protected. But there's a real danger there. And I think this text is sort of flagging that danger about what can happen to your soul when you construct a world made of crevasses. And this text, I think, is an invitation. Like, you really wish in that Hades text that crevasse wasn't there, so that somebody could cross and show mercy to somebody else. Like, I wish. Yeah. And one of the things you say often, which I try to keep in mind, is if you see something in the text you don't like, figure out how to fix it in your own world. And so that, like, I wish there wasn't a chasm there, makes me think, okay, I can't do anything about that chasm. I can't make Abraham cross that bridge, but I can find the chasms in my life and in my world. And I think this text is an invitation to that. It's thinking specifically about wealth and the ways in which wealth protect us.
Yeah.
And then it's thinking specifically about Torah and the vision of community in which nobody has more than they need until everybody has what they need. And that is very much not the world in which I live. So I think this is an invitation into relationship as much. I mean, you can read this as a fiery warning, and maybe we should, but you can also read it as an invitation to relationship. Like this, all in the world the rich man had to do was stop and talk to Lazarus.
Yeah.
And treat him like a human being and show him some compassion like the Good Samaritan showed to the man on the side of the road. And like, you can do that. I can do that. I can arrange my life so that I'm in touch with people who move me.
Yeah. And
I can respond compassionately to their agony. And maybe even get in touch with my own in some ways that I might try to protect myself from. I think that's where I'm going today.
Bobby, you stirred up so many stirrings that were already sort of starting to stir, but in such a more concrete way. And my concluding thoughts are really sort of around the same kinds of questions and ideas that you're raising up. Where do I even start? While I was reading this text, for some reason, when I was thinking about that chasm, like that, the sense of a chasm, when you feel real compassion rise up in the world that we are in right now, but you don't, it feels like you can't do anything about it because it's gotten sort of there are so many small things you didn't respond to, that so many people didn't respond to, that now it feels huge and overpowering. I had this memory of however many years ago, seeing on TV footage of babies being taken from their mother's arms as they crossed the border, the southern border into the United States. And I had young children at the time, and I could just feel in my body, like that, the agony in my body to see that. And I really felt like there's nothing I can do. Like I just want to avoid feeling that pain. So I just don't want to look at the news because it was so far away. And so I think the call that you're pointing to, that I think the text is also pointing to make sure our lives don't become that. Make sure that when we see someone right in front of us, I mean, I think part of what holds me back from sitting with someone who is suffering, someone that I don't know, someone who's poor, is the knowledge that it's going to reflect back to me my own weaknesses and limitations and the enormity of a problem I can't solve, and maybe questions of what I should be doing that I'm not doing, and like all these sort of like deeply uncomfortable things that I can avoid. I can avoid by just driving a different way. So why wouldn't I avoid them? And I think there are two answers to that. One is the sort of immediacy of because of that person. And, well, maybe there are three answers. And because of the state of your own soul, you need to feel that distress in order to be able to continue to feel empathy, but also so that some other chasm doesn't develop that then when you do feel moved, it's not too late. It's never too late on earth, but it gets a lot more complicated once it's baked into this whole big system of power.
Mm-hmm.
But we can pull at that, at all the initial steps. Like we can pull all the strands of that, so those things are less likely to form in our world. And I am going to try to believe that if I at this point, it is going out of my way to make sure that I am in regular contact and relationship with people who are suffering in different kinds of ways.
Yeah.
That compassion will stir in me, that will give me some direction of what to do, of how to respond. That is a way that your soul or your spleen or your womb or whatever, language you're looking at.
Yeah.
You don't have to know what to do before you engage. That is what I'm going to start with that idea.
I love that, Amy. Well, you were saying there, that we do experience these chasms in our world that seem uncrossable. And that's actually to the advantage of the empire,
Absolutely.
right? To keep us separated from people who are not like us, or whose challenges, if we build solidarities with other people, that challenges the power of the empire. And so, like these chasms between us based on economics or religion or politics or any number of things that feel so natural and unavoidable and given, uncrossable, but they aren't. And I love what you're saying about, like, the first thing is just to build relationships across those chasms, and then we'll see what happens.
And then you see what happens.
See what happens when the people get together, think of ourselves as community. It can change the world.
I hope so. I sure hope so.
Me too.
Bobby, next week we are skipping just a little bit to chapter 18, starting in verse 31 through 19:10, which is a story of Zacchaeus. Is that how you say his name?
I don't know. I say Zacchaeus because I was taught the song, Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he.
Is he wee?
He's wee. He's a short man, so I've always related to him because I am not the tallest person you will ever meet.
Okay, cool.
There's a few stories that we're going to read, like, of which Zacchaeus is one, but there's also the story of Bartimaeus and a prediction of resurrection. So there's lots to talk about next time.
All right. Well, it seems like there always is.
There always is. It's true.
I look forward to it, Bobby. Thanks for a good conversation today.
You too. I'll see you next time.
Bye. Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Bible Worm. If you've enjoyed this free podcast, we hope you'll help us keep it going by joining our Patreon for as little as $4 per month. You can also sign up for other goodies like early access, video lectures, weekly liturgies, and more. Visit patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast for details.
Bible Worm is produced and edited by Bobby Williamson. Our theme song is sung by Colin Bagby, and our theme music is The World at Large by Dano Songs. Many thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping make this podcast possible.
Join us again next week when we'll read Luke chapter 18, verse 31 through chapter 19, verse 10, the story of Zacchaeus. Until then, keep on digging.